Revis in Omaha, Texas. I'm a member of the Cypress Basin Genealogical and Historical Society, which meets in Mount Pleasant, Texas. We're visiting today with Mrs. Allie Smith of Omaha, and she is a member of the Morris County Historical Committee, which is appointed by the Commissioner's Court. Ms. Smith knows a lot about the history of Morris County. She has done a lot of work on the cemeteries and found a lot about the older towns. Today we're going to let her talk to you about an old town called Salem.
The first thing I want to tell is that the old town of Salem must have been established from my history report in 1837, and from that time on people went to drifting in from Mississippi, North Carolina, and then in Alabama and other parts of the United States. And at that time it was the only town between Dangerfield and Omaha now. And it came in as more or less a cotton country, and they had 2 gins there. They had 2 saloons, and they had churches and schools, which was, I imagine, and had a sawmill that helped build the homes, but they first started with log cabins there. And Mr. Spence Thigpen, he was one of the first ones from North Carolina to come, and he settled there with about 5 or 6 children in the family, and he was quite active in all the things such as farming and doing things. The gins, they had the 2 gins to bale the cotton after it was produced. And then the Glass family, whom they lived there, and they moved to Omaha, the older person did, and he married a Connor. And Mr. Glass owned the Glass Club Lake out here at the time of his death. This is in Omaha now. And then back to some more of them was the Currys, and the Currys settled there. And I can't tell too much about the history of them since they don't know nothing about it, but they did have a Curry cemetery after the people went to dine about 200 yards north of this town, Salem. And then later they had a cemetery called Huff, southeast of the town, Connolly. And Mr. Capella, Jim Capella, owned one of the gins, and I don't have the history of who owned the second gin in that town. And there were 650 voters in the town, which would estimate the population of it close to 2,000 people, and that would be along in 1855. Since I didn't get through with the Thigpen family that came in from North Carolina, I wanted to tell about him being married to the Miss Glass here, and they moved to, the Glass family moved to Omaha, and the Thigpens moved on into Omaha, but the younger ones were the ones, but the older man died and was buried in the Reynolds Cemetery, southwest of Salem, about 3.5 miles. And then later, the younger generation moved into Omaha. Now, I will tell you about the hotels in the town of Salem, which they were very much needed on account of the people coming in to be just in the town for some of the things that they were doing and happenings of it. And also had 2 grist mills and the 2 gins, and they kept operating on until 1935. And then one of the hotels still stands, which you will see a picture of that later, and one of them is not there. And I just don't know much else now to tell right now. The vanishing of the town was caused from the saloons being there, and so many people are getting killed. Other people got afraid to go into the town, afraid they would be killed too, so that just caused the town to vanish away more. And finally, it just went down to no town at all.
Okay.
He wants me to look towards the camera.
Yeah, and tell about the old gin now.
Not the street here.
Well, that too.
Yeah. Okay, I'll start with this. Okay, I'm standing in the mid-street of the old town Salem, which is called a ghost town now. And to my right is one of the old gin stands, which was owned by Mr. Jim Capella. And it is something like 130 years old right now. And in the meantime, there was another gin to the west of it, but it has been moved away in time. But they baled something like 500 bales of cotton by hand, not by press, during the time. And later, they had a grist mill in it, and the grist mill kept going until about 1930 or 35. And finally it closed down. And now the gin is used for our barn. You tell it.
We're now standing on the other side of the road, and Mrs. Smith is going to tell us something about the old hotel that was in the town of Salem.
This hotel left of me is one of those that stood here when the town was being built, something like 150 years ago. And it has part of it yet, and then there was another one just east of it that has already been vanished away. While the other part of the town was going, it went away too.
Tell something about the area here, about the town where everybody lived.
About the pioneers?
Uh-huh.
Well, I can't give no places where the people live, but the Mr. Spence Pigpen and his family lived here in town, but around in the country they growed the cotton and brought the cotton here to the gin. And to my right, towards the other side, is where the saloons were, and I don't know just who run the saloons. There were two of them. And then the Currys, I don't know what kind of industry they had here, but they lived in this part of town too. And let's see what, there's another family I don't recall that lived in here. Could y'all remember? Glass family, the Glass family. They was a Glass family lived in here, and Mr. Spence Thigpen had a second wife, and he married a Glass lady, which was the older people lived here. And later, Mr. Spence Thigpen died and was buried over in the Salem Cemetery, about 3.5 miles southwest of this town, Salem. And then the younger people of the Thigpens family, the generation, moved into Omaha, also the Thigpens and the Curry.
Okay.
The Curry family lived here, and later, as they grew older, they were dying, and they established and started a cemetery to my left, about 200 yards, which they hadn't started a cemetery in the town of Salem at that time. Although they did have schools and churches here, but they didn't have a cemetery started. And then the Huff Cemetery is to my right, over south of this town.
We have now traveled a short distance south of the old town of Salem. I'm standing in front of Johnny May Johnson's home, looking to the south toward the entrance to the old Huff Cemetery. Although there were people who knew of the existence of this cemetery and had looked for it, they were unable to find it. We believe underbrush concealed the view of the markers from the road until a recent cleanup began. As we're looking through the gate, we can see the markers from the roadway. This cemetery has been used by both black and white families. There are many markers in here, and there are also many places where there are depressions and no markers, and then some that have rocks. The Huff family had some people buried here, and we think that the cemetery got its name from this family. This cemetery was once considered a lost cemetery because it was not on a map, but the Bogan family knew it was here because it is on their land. Recently, the Bogan family deeded a little over 2 acres to this cemetery association, and they are doing a cleanup job and saving the cemetery. This marker is one to about the last person who was buried in the cemetery. You can see the cleanup that is going on here. Brush is being cleared away and burned. And there's some of the markers. You can see some of the markers that are hidden in the trees. The markers in this cemetery are not in any particular order. They're just scattered over these 2 acres. We had to go through some of the underbrush that hasn't been cleared away to find some of the markers. There are several members of the Bogan family buried in here. These are some of the Bogan markers. There are also some members of the Rutherford family buried in this cemetery, and we will see a marker for some of them in a little bit, and then later on we'll hear about these people. This is Jane Davis at the home of Fannie Lou Bogan. She and her sister, Johnny Mae Johnson, are going to tell us something about the Huff Cemetery. This home is close to this cemetery. Now, which one of y'all wants to tell us something first? Johnny Mae? I'll hold it and you can
All right. I live up there close to the Huff Cemetery, and it's there before I was born. Started. The Huff started. White. And that's all I know about it. And then after my daddy bought it, John Bogan, well...
Do you know when he bought it?
No, I don't.
Well, that's okay.
And
I think he bought it in 1900.
now you
What year?
1900.
1900? Okay. Tell us what else you know about the cemetery.
He said John Bogan come here right after Sarima. That was what, 18 and 60, well, 62, I think.
60.
60, 68, that's what it was. 18 and 68, right after surrender. And he said the cemetery was up there then. Mel Viney was our great-grandma. She died 1911. And she was of slavery. And she would run off, and the slavery had to go catch her. Had to get on horses and catch her. He was
Okay, tell us now about that Masonic ring and what happened about that.
Oh, the Sonic ring?
Uh-huh.
Oh, he just was a Sonic. He was a Sonic Lodge.
Uh-huh.
And they buried him up there when I was a little girl. And that made me join, you know, after I got grown. I said when I was a little girl, I was going to join. Mace.
You wanted to join it because of that, huh?
Mm-hmm. Mace, but Eastern Star.
Uh-huh.
Johnny Mae Johnson.
Now they're going to tell something about the Rutherford family and about the twins that died.
Mm-hmm. The Rutherfords died. There's two twins, and one died that morning and one died that evening. They buried both of them together. Twin graves.
There's a Mr. Hall in California who has written and wanted to know about this Huff Cemetery. He had some relatives named Rutherford that was buried in this cemetery, and we think this probably was his relatives. We'd like to thank Johnny Mae Johnson and Fannie Lou Bogan for their information on the Huff Cemetery. And this has been very informative to us, and we'll go on and find out some more from someone else. We want to thank Miss Allie Smith for her information on the town of Salem and of the Huff Cemetery, and we'd like for her to add anything else that she would like to.
Well, evidently we know that these two places were here during the Civil War, if not years before. That means a lot of this to our country, to know that we had a town during that time.
Okay, I was asked to find the Huff Cemetery in Morris County, which is quite a challenge. We, another Miss Smith, another man by the name of Smith I know real well. We found it, then contacted the Davises and got all this started. In the meantime, we noticed surveying stakes drove down, and further with inquiries found that it is on record. There's 2 3/10 acres of land deeded from the Bogans. It is registered in the courthouse in Dangerfield. They have a Huff Memorial Cemetery Fund in the State Bank of Omaha, which has the money that has been put into it for this fund to upkeep on the cemetery. And I'm well pleased that the cemetery is going to be saved. There's work days scheduled, and they also have a trustees that are set up for this cemetery. With that is all I have at this time to add, Ms. Davis.
Okay, we'd like to thank Billy Joe Lindsay for all the work he's done on getting this information together, and we're so glad that they are saving this cemetery. And they tell us they're going to put a cyclone fence around it, and it'll be cleaned up and saved.